David here with Fig Boot on Pens. Today I have something different for you. In this video, I'm not going to be taking a look at a pen, but we'll be taking a look at some nibs. Music nibs, to be precise. Let me start with a little backstory. A while back, I had purchased a pen with a music nib. It was my second. And I was talking about it up in the Pen Addict Slack channel. If you're not familiar with Slack, it's basically a chat room with different channels for different topics. Brad Dowdy from the Pen Addict blog and podcast has set one up for fountain pen folks. For example, the Pen Addict Slack has one channel for ink, one for selling and trading, which is actually a good place to sell a pen if you're looking to do so. One for their podcast, another for fountain pens in general. You get the idea. It's really a good place to engage in some good pen conversation in a real-time live format. If you'd like to check it out, I'll put a link in the notes below. All you have to do is just fill out the contact form and Brad will set you up with an invite. There's a lot of folks who hang out there on a regular basis. So I was sharing some pictures of my new music nib, and Mike Madison, who is the man behind the Inkdependence blog and YouTube channel, who was in the channel at the same time, had a suggestion. I've known Mike for a while. He doesn't live too far away from me, and we both attend the Triangle Pen Club in our area. He suggested that that since I had two pens with music nibs, and he had two himself, and they were all from different manufacturers, that we could do something a little bit different and maybe something combined. And I thought it was a great idea. So here we are. What's going to happen is that I have 4 music nibs from 4 different manufacturers that I'll be reviewing here. I'm not going to be discussing the pens themselves that much. The idea here is to focus on the nibs. And that I'm going to be going over the features of each nib, and they are all rather unique. And then show some writing samples for each so you can see how they compare. And then finally, I'm going to rank them from 1 to 4 from my favorite to my least favorite. And then after I'm through recording this video, I'm going to get these 4 pens over to Mike, and he's going to do the same thing. And then we're going to post these at the same time. So when you're done watching this video, if you've watched this one first, you could check out the link below and check out Mike's to see what he felt about these 4 same nibs. Now, this isn't a competition to see who can put together a better video. It's more of something fun, just to see how our independent opinions and tastes compare. First of all, what is a music nib? Traditionally, a music nib was named as such because it was created to write music. But most modern nibs are essentially glorified italic or stub nibs, and typically very wide. And that you'll see that some of them have 2 tines, like a standard fountain pen nib, and others have 3 tines. The purpose of having 3 tines is to have an additional ink channel in order to spread the ink across the entire tip of the nib. The nibs are mainly used to add some flair to your writing. You could certainly use them to write music as well if you'd like. Composers have had a need for large lines widths with variation between up and down and left and right strokes. If you take a look at this music score, you can see that the vertical lines on notes, called the stems, are very thin, and then the beams, the horizontal lines connecting the group of notes, are wide. And then the heads of the notes, the little oval part at the bottom, is either filled in or not, depending on the duration of the note. A music nib will give you the ability to create each of these different aspects of the notes. And they even make nibs with like 5 points on them, and they kind of look like a fork. And those nibs are used to create the staff, which is the set of 5 horizontal lines on both the treble and bass clefs. Okay, enough of Music 101. Let's go over here to the side table to look at some nibs. The 4 nibs I'm going to be looking over today are on the following pens. First of all, we have the Sailor 1911 Standard in the brown Mosaic finish. Then we have a Platinum 3776 Century Bourgogne. Next is the Pilot Custom Heritage 912. And then finally, there is the Franklin Kristo Model 2 Intrinsic. Now, the Sailor and the Platinum are actually Mike's pens, and the Pilot and the Franklin Kristo are mine. So let's go ahead and start with the Platinum get it actually in the frame here. This is the 3776, and the ink that we're using here is Mont Blanc Lucky Orange. You can see here that this nib actually has 2 breather holes. It has 2 slits and then 3 tines. Now, I'm not going to take the pen apart, but this feed should actually have 2 ink channels as well. I like this close-up of the nib. You can see that the nib is very wide and very flat, but rounded and not sharp. I like how you can see the ink through the tines as well. I also like how the W design on the top of the nib fits precisely between the 2 slits. And then this is what the underside looks like. Let's go ahead and see how this nib writes. You can see here that the downstrokes are going to be wider than the side strokes. And I find this pen or this Platinum to be a bit on the stiffer side. This isn't a nib that you're going to push it at all. You just want to let the nib do all of the work. And that when you do go side to side, it does produce a much finer line. And in regard to a writing sample, Seiga Ruse is one of my favorite bands. They're from Iceland, and their music can be very powerful, but also very polarizing. People have a tendency to feel that their music is either incredibly beautiful and powerful, or they think, what on earth am I listening to? Their album Takk, T-A-K-K, which means thanks in Icelandic, is a really good entry point to their music if you want to check them out. This is a 14 karat gold nib. And I find this nib to be decently smooth, but there aren't really, as you can see here, large amounts of line variation naturally occurring during the typical writing sessions. So how about if we actually write a little bit of music with our music nib? Now, I'm not a musician here, so bear with me, but I'm going to try to do my best here in order to write a little bit of music. We'll have a couple of notes down here, and then as you see, typically you're going to write with it oriented this way on the side so that you can get thin strokes as you go up and down. Then we'll have another note here, and then one more over here. Then we'll have a line right there. Okay, the next pen that we're going to check out is the Sailor 1911 Standard in the brown mosaic finish. So here we have the Sailor 1911, and this is the standard. And the ink we're using here is Sailor Rikyu Cha. I'm probably butchering that name. That it's kind of a brownish green that looks a little bit like wet tea leaves. Let's see if I can get a little bit of color in here so you can see that it looks a little bit like wet tea leaves. You can see here that the Sailor music nib is 21 karat gold, but unlike the 3 other nibs that I'll be showing today, this one only has a single slit and 2 tines. This is essentially an italic nib. You can see here the tipping is ground down rather flat on the bottom of the nib. And you can see there's a decent amount of variance between the vertical and horizontal lines in this writing here. So if I have a vertical and horizontal line, you can see that there's a decent amount of variance in here. And this is a very smooth writer. And in regard to reverse writing, it performs well, very well as well. And in regard to a writing sample, Sufjan Stevens is another one of my favorite artists. Just about every one of his albums has a different style, everything from folk to folk rock to electronica and even kind of symphonic style. A really great place to start with Sufjan's music is his album Illinois, where all of the songs reference places and events and persons related to the U.S. state of Illinois. He's an extremely talented musician who writes some very heartfelt lyrics. So let's add some more notes to our song here. Now in regard to this sailor, it's very nice, but I don't necessarily get the feeling that you're using something that out of the ordinary. Now it is extraordinarily smooth, but it doesn't necessarily feel like what you would think a music nib feels like, even though you do get that variance between the horizontal and the vertical as well. Next up is a nib by Franklin Kristo, which I have here on the Model 2 Intrinsic. Take a look at that thing. It's a little hard to see with the black nib, but this is the largest and widest out of the bunch. It does have 2 slits and 3 tines, and as you can see here in these close-up pictures, there is no tipping at all on this steel nib. And then here's what the underside of the nib looks like. Pretty much identical to the top of the nib, maybe with maybe it's a little bit more rounded. With a nib this wide, you can get a massive amount of line variation here. We have, you know what, I forgot to write the name of the pen. Here, let's put this down here. So we have the Franklin Kristoff, and then we'll just call it the number 2. And the ink that we're using here is Franklin Kristoff Spanish Blue. This has the kind of the most extremes of the music nib. It has the widest wide strokes and the most narrow of the narrow strokes as well. It's a very firm nib. Compared to the other 3, which are gold, this is actually a steel nib, but I'm not holding that against it. In regard to reverse writing, it's a little bit scratchier than it is standard-wise, but you still get a large amount of line variation out of here. And then in regard to a writing sample, You know, I really enjoy Radiohead as well. I've seen them several times in concert, and each time it was an amazing experience. Quick Radiohead factoid. The name Radiohead was actually was taken from the name of a reggae song by the Talking Heads, which was a favorite of the band around the time they signed their first recording contract. If you haven't checked it out, Radiohead's latest album, The Moon-Shaped Pool, is outstanding from beginning to end. It's just fantastic. You know, in regard to this nib, if you're looking for a nib that is something different, that'll provide you with a unique writing experience, then the Franklin Kristo is one you might want to check out. It's not as practical for everyday writing, but it's very unique nonetheless. Okay, so now let's add some additional notes to our song up here. Okay, now finally in this group we have the Pilot Custom Heritage 912. Now I actually leave the sticker on here just because I have several Pilot pens in the Custom and Custom Heritage line that look fairly similar to this, so this actually helps me identify this pen. But what we have here is the Pilot Custom Heritage 912, and the ink we have here is boy, what is it? I think it's Ackerman Shocking Blue. We'll just call it SB. Now with this nib, this Pilot nib has 2 slits and 3 tines. You can see here that in this side picture of the nib, it's the most stub-like of the bunch. And with the end of the nib kind of only slightly rounded. It's the only one of this group where the tip of the nib is essentially flat. Here you can kind of see it in comparison to the others. There is a good deal of line comparison or line variation that you can get in this pen, and that this pen just feels a bit more crisp when writing with it, which is understandable considering the pictures we just saw. In regard to reverse writing, it's actually a little bit on the sharp side. And then in regard to a writing sample, in my opinion, The Who is right up there with one of the greatest bands of all time. If you're young and think that the music of the 60s and 70s is just your parents' music or your grandparents' music, do yourself a favor and listen to the album Who's Next. From top to bottom, it's as solid as it gets, and it might just open your ears to an entire generation of music that really laid the groundwork for what you listen to today. And then now we have the final notes of our song. Okay, so now we have our song. Now, what song is this? You know what? It's something that you might just recognize from one of my favorite classical composer. That was Serenade number 13 for strings in G major by Mozart. Now, I'm not going to attempt the German name. I know that I would just butcher that. Okay, so now, how do I rank these nibs? You know, it's tough because each one of these nibs does something better than the other three. How I'm going to rank these is in regard to how I feel they work for how I use a fountain pen, which is mainly daily writing. Not for calligraphy, not for drawing, not for writing music, just daily writing. And, you know, I wanted to also say that I really liked all four of these nibs. So just because a nib is ranked lower doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad nib. I would really recommend folks pick up any of these four unique nibs. I'd say for me, coming in at number 4 is the Platinum. You know, I just felt that when writing with this nib, it wasn't, while it distinctly looks like a music nib, it really didn't give me the feeling of writing with anything unique. It does write beautifully though. Then at number 3, I have the Franklin Kristo. This is a nib of extremes, the thinnest and the thickest lines. If you're using this for specialty writing, it might be great for you. But for daily writing, it's just a bit too thick and wet for my tastes. I find myself wanting to write larger than I typically do when I use this nib. Coming in at number 2, I would have the Sailor. Now, while it doesn't necessarily look like the other nibs, it performs very, very well and is extraordinarily smooth, the smoothest of all these pens. I found it to be the softest nib as well, which could be because that it was 21 karat gold compared to the 14 karat of the others and the steel of the Franklin Kristoff. So coming in at number 1, for my favorite music nib out of these 4 is the Pilot 912. Or just the Pilot music nib. For me, this nib had the most personality. It produced a solid line variation and really gave me the feeling like I was writing with something unique. And in daily writing, it can kind of effortlessly add a lot of flair to your writing with minimal effort. So there you have my rankings of these 4 nibs. Now, if you check out the notes below, you'll find a link to Mike's video, and you can see what he felt about these 4 nibs. Now, I'll be checking that out as well because I'll be interested to see what he has to say about these. I'm as curious as you are as to what he will enjoy the most. So, I hope you enjoyed this half of the Music Nib Spectacular. It was fun to put together, and I'm glad Mike suggested it. So, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.